I'm going to speak a little bit about a couple of cases against myself. But I want to focus on what organizational strategy for fighting slap suits. And Linda talked a little bit about the importance of having reporters that are strong enough and willing enough to go to battle with corporations. You know, slap suits are really, in my view, generally speaking, a corporate assault on democratic rights. Not just, as Josh said, not just an attack on the right to protest or the right to organize, but on all democratic rights. So I want to look a little bit about organizational capacity to fight corporations when they sue. I want to just talk a little bit about some of the need for anti-SLAPP legislation and looking at both provincial and also in terms of international commitments that Canada's made. Now, so the first case that I faced was as the Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Racism Education and Research Society, as Bob mentioned. My job was to do research on hate groups and to expose hate wherever it occurred, and to help kids getting out of hate groups. So there was a series of broadcasts by a radio station, AM 1040, in Vancouver, that gave voice to some of the racism in Canada. They were broadcasting and allowing organizations to speak about racism, their kind of racism, and I felt it was the radio station was being used as a forum to help these groups recruit young people into their organizations. And you have to remember, this was a few years ago, but you have to remember that these organizations were quite large and powerful. You know, the Heritage Front, WAR, White Aryan Resistance. And you might remember that we had a big demonstration in downtown Vancouver here a few years ago that we helped organize. And that was attended by about 3,000 people to protest against Tom Metzger coming into Canada to advertise his organization, WAR. And we had a young person in Vancouver by the name of Thomas McAleer, who was helping WAR organize on the internet and through a telephone hotline. So knowing this, and no one else was talking about it, I began to speak, and I said publicly that AM 1040 was providing a forum for racists, and so AM 1040 sued me. And I'm one of the newspapers that broadcast this information, and that was the Western Jewish Bulletin. So we went to Discovery, and fortunately we had a lawyer on our board, our nonprofit society, so we were very lucky. We went to Discovery, and AM 1040 decided that they didn't want to go any further, they didn't want any more information coming out about their radio station. That's my guess anyway. And they settled, so and had to pay costs. So that's the first case. That was for defamation. The second case was just recently, in October 2014. I had been working with some people in Burnaby, a small residence organization called Burnaby Residents Opposing Kinder Morgan. And we had been holding workshops, conferences. The mayor of Burnaby, Derek Corrigan, had spoken at some of these conferences. Kennedy Stewart, the MP for Burnaby Lougheed, also spoke. And we were providing information about the dangers of shipping oil, diluted bitumen, through pipelines around Burnaby Mountain into Westridge and shipping it through Burrard Inlet. So we've been organizing these meetings, and all of a sudden, Kinder Morgan, or that's the company that owns Trans Mountain. It's the funny thing about Kinder Morgan, they advertise all their advertising that you see on television, and it's almost every 2 or 3 minutes you see an advertisement saying how safe how safe the pipeline is. And they'll say, Trans Mountain has owned this pipeline since 1955, and how it's been a wonderful safety record, which is not absolutely true at all. There have been 4 or 5 major incidents in Burnaby alone with Trans Mountain. But what you'll notice is that the owner of Trans Mountain, the company that owns it, is Kinder Morgan, Texas-based oil company. But they don't say this is Kinder Morgan, they say this is Trans Mountain. So in any case, the Residents Association was developing educational materials, and I helped develop a Facebook page and a website, and I did some public speaking about the danger of shipping dilbit through an urban center like that, and also, of course, about climate change. Kinder Morgan announced that they were going to change the direction of the pipeline and put it through a conservation area on Burnaby Mountain, which I thought was absolutely insane given the seismic risk on the west coast. This is one of the most active areas in Canada. So we began to organize protests on Burnaby Mountain in the conservation area. Kinder Morgan decided that they were going to go ahead with their project regardless of the demonstrations and the protests, and decided that they were going to sue 5 people and the residents' organization. One of the people was myself. And they were suing us for $5.6 million, which is not small change, no matter how rich you are. We came together, we raised money, and we were able to get a number of lawyers, and Neil Chandler defended myself and the Residents Association. We were, concerned. There was a lot of debate in the organization about how to proceed. There was a lot of fear. Linda was talking about the chill factor and the silencing of organizations and individuals as a result of facing a huge lawsuit. And that occurred. There's no doubt about that. There was huge debate in the organization. But nevertheless, we were able to hire, there were 3 lawyers representing the 5 people on the Residents Association. The outcome was that the judge decided that cumulatively there was enough evidence for this to go to trial. So, and the evidence were, the charges were, against me, for example, was assault, trespass, interference with contract, a nuisance. But the big one was conspiracy. And the evidence against me were some posts on a public or a semi-public Facebook page, which I was an administrator for, and an interview that I gave to the Burnaby Now. The interview in the Burnaby Now quoted me as saying that protests were important, and what we were doing was organizing picnics, not pipelines, to indicate that these were peaceful demonstrations and that we were obligated to protest and to observe what was transpiring and to make sure that everybody knew that they were cutting down trees on conservation land that should have been protected. So, make a long story short, Kinder Morgan was facing a huge outcry. Okay, I'll try to make this fast. Kinder Morgan was facing this huge outcry in the media about what they were doing to residents and the dangers of this, of the work they were undertaking. And Ian Anderson, the president of Trans Mountain, decided that it was he went on TV and he announced that he was not really serious about the lawsuits. After all the money that had been spent already and all the fights and all the disturbances that it caused, and he said, well, we're not really serious about it, and we intend to compensate the people that were being sued. So they issued, or they allowed a discontinuance. They offered a discontinuance. 2 of the 5 people who were sued accepted the discontinuance and argued very strenuously for everybody to accept it and to stop and not to protest Kinder Morgan. I thought that was ridiculous, but this is what happens in an organization. There is a definite chill, there's a definite conflict in the organizations about going ahead and fighting. But I said, no, I wasn't going to accept the discontinuance, and three of the people that were charged proceeded. I applied for the charges to be dropped on the basis that it was a slap suit. The case was heard in January. There was no evidence against me whatsoever for any of these charges. The only thing that was being alleged at this stage was conspiracy. A conspiracy for me to be engaged with people that were protesting on Burnaby Mountain. So my name was thrown in to this mix simply because I was the administrator of a Facebook page, my name was known, and I was giving information to the media. And that's the basis on which I was charged. The judge in the case, when I applied to have the charges dismissed, decided that based on the first judge's decision that he was going to dismiss my application to have the charges dismissed and to allow it to go forward. Immediately after that judge made that decision, Kinder Morgan issued a unilateral discontinuance, which meant that everybody was charged was forced to go any action. And I thought that was totally unfair because my reputation had been spoiled. It was defamation against me because I was not part of any conspiracy to break the law whatsoever. Assault, trespass, I was not engaged in any activity whatsoever. I was simply giving information and organizing protests. But I was still charged. And that's what can happen. Now, Jane Shin, the MLA for Burnaby Moheed, was an amazing person, amazing politician, who worked with us to get legislation and have the NDP table legislation in May of 2015, just a short time ago, which was an anti-SLAPP bill to stop SLAPP suits in BC. The NDP had passed legislation in 2001 to stop anti-SLAPP legislation. As soon as the Liberals came back into power, 6 months after they came into power, they revoked the anti-SLAPP legislation that the NDP had passed. So my argument here, and I have to go, my time is up, but my argument here is that we really need provincial anti-SLAPP legislation, but we can't just depend on that. We have to build organizations that can fight and that are determined to fight and that are organized to fight corporations that are assaulting our democratic rights. And we also, very briefly, we have to look at our international covenants. Canada signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which guarantees the right to expression, to assembly, all the democratic rights we take for granted. Canada signed an international agreement in 1976, and it's never been implemented in Canada. We need to investigate how we can bring this legislation or get some power from that legislation so that we can make sure that people's rights are protected.